And speaking of Omega and AEW, they ran a show last night, which I know many of you watched for free on Bleacher Report, called Fyter Fest in Daytona Beach, Florida at the Ocean Center, which I had a chance to watch. On the whole, I thought it was a fun show. Not as good as Double or Nothing, but as sort of a buffer show before All Out, I thought it was fun for what it was. Commentary I thought was much improved, with Golden Boy out there alongside Jim Ross and Excalibur. They kept Alex Marvez in the back, and that is probably the best place for him. Although, to be fair, now we're all judging him off one performance. He is not a wrestling announcer. He has written about wrestling. He's a wrestling fan. They brought him in. He did one show. He didn't do particularly well. I do think that he is entitled to at least another opportunity. I don't want to completely count the guy out for good. Maybe give him another shot, but I thought Golden Boy was much more comfortable in the role. There just seemed to be better chemistry there, and he did a much better job than Marvez did back on that first show. I do have to say this, I watched The Buy-In, which is their pre-show. I watched that as well. That Librarian nonsense, the Librarian gimmick with Leva Bates and Peter Avalon just died a death on this show, and rightfully so. It is terrible. It is a terrible gimmick. If they did that on WWE television, people would be revolting. They would be coming to WWE with pitchforks and torches. The Best Friends beat SoCal Uncensored and Private Party in a triple threat match. This was Private Party's first big match here in AEW. I had the chance to watch many of their matches in House of Glory. In fact, they've been announced as the opponents for the Young Bucks. Young Bucks are making their big return to HOG in what may end up being their final independent match before the TNT show kicks off this fall. Their opponents are going to be Private Party. So it's a comeback and also a goodbye. It's a return and sort of a parting of the ways. It'll be Private Party's final appearance in House of Glory. So that's going to be a hell of a match. It's going to be a fun show. I look forward to being there for that. I thought they did a tremendous job here of making a statement and letting people know what they're all about. They were the best part of this entire match. This was a great match, but they were the best part of the entire match. And the crowd was into everything they did, and just a lot of great stuff. A great showing here. A great first showing for Private Party. They're very young. They're very young. And they're this good at such a young age, they're only going to get better. So I thought this was a great night. Even though they didn't win, Best Friends won. I thought it was a great night for Private Party. Now, when the match was over, they continued this angle that began at Double or Nothing with this faction, the Dark Order. They appeared on the big screen. They were sort of talking to the Best Friends when the lights went out. And the lights were out for a very long time. When they finally came on, the Dark Order was surrounding the ring. So now Beretta and Chucky are surrounded. You don't know what's going to happen. And they're just standing there. Nothing is happening. They're just standing there. Finally, the lights go out again. And they're out forever. And when they come back on, the Dark Order is nowhere to be found. A very basic angle, but it just felt like it took forever to get to the point. When the lights went out, it was like, did they forget to put them back on? Everything here took longer than it should have. But obviously, they're setting up a first match and a first feud between the Dark Order and the Best Friends. I just thought that it just took way too long for them to get to the point here. Then we had a very polarizing match, judging on some of the feedback that I've gotten and some of the feedback I've seen on social media. Michael Nakazawa beat Alex Jabali in a hardcore match. This was the final match on the Buy-In pre-show. This was apparently supposed to take place at last year's CEO show, which is this annual, I guess it's like an annual fighting game down in Orlando. Jabali injured his Achilles last year. He couldn't wrestle, so the match never happened. I did not hate this as much as other people I saw online did, and I know Jim Cornette did. But what else would you expect? I am of the belief here that you should never have a non-wrestler out there playing wrestler in a full match and getting as much offense in as this guy got. Like, it's fine to do angles with non-wrestlers or celebrities and stuff like that, but this was a full match. And to my knowledge, this guy is not a wrestler. If he's wrestled, it's probably been very limited. But he was hanging in there with Nakazawa like, he was his peer, like he was his equal. And, look, unless you're some kind of gigantic celebrity, they brought in Floyd Mayweather one year for WrestleMania. Now, you could argue if Mayweather was deserving of that role. Was he the right person for the role? At the time, he was a big celebrity, and they felt that it would do big business. As it turned out, that didn't quite work out the way they had hoped. But unless you have like a really big celebrity, and maybe you can get away with it. But this guy, Jabali, is clearly not. In fact, they joked on commentary that this is the one time, which I kind of chuckled at, the one time that you'll see blatant nepotism here in All Elite Wrestling. So they were using game controllers as weapons. I mean, they use regular objects as well. Kendo sticks and tables. This guy was pulling tables out from under the ring like he was a 20-year vet. They had game controllers, and they had little colored blocks. They weren't Legos, but they kind of looked like Legos. So instead of thumbtacks, it was blocks, and he slammed Nakazawa on the blocks. This was a total comedy match. And this guy got to play wrestler for one night. And the match itself, I didn't think was too horrendous, if you just sort of take it for what it was. The crowd did. The crowd had fun with it. The crowd didn't turn on it. The crowd didn't chant boring. They didn't start a wave. They were into it. And so, I can't really crap on it too much, because I thought it could have been a lot worse than it was. But if you just look at it for being total comedy, which was the intent, then it was what it was. That's the best I can say about this. Then the actual event started. I loved the setup. I loved just like the entrance. They had the little kiddie pool down below. It was kind of like they were going for the beach vibe. They were down in Daytona Beach. It would have been even better for them to do it like the old Nitro spring break shows. Maybe hold it outside, have a giant pool, invite a bunch of college kids. They didn't quite go that far. Although I would suggest something like that for TNT. I wouldn't mind them resurrecting that old idea. Although Eric Bischoff now is back with WWE, he's going to be running SmackDown. Maybe we'll get Spring Breakout SmackDown edition. But I said this before, and I stand by this. Chris Jericho is a very big part of AEW. He's running his second cruise in January, and I don't see how they can't film, if not a full show, because maybe logistically, on the high seas, you can't film a live show for TNT, but at least film matches on the ship, on the cruise ship. I don't see how they can't do that. They have to. They have to do that. We had Shima pinning Christopher Daniels in the opening match. Straight match, which was kind of refreshing coming off what we had just seen with this Jabali character. Pretty basic match. Shima wins, sunset flip into a Liger bomb. Good match. We had Riho defeating Nyla Rose and Yuka Sakazaki in a three-way match. I thought this was fun. Nyla Rose is sort of in the Awesome Kong role of being the kind of the alpha female of this women's division, and she's physically bigger than the other women, and so she was, she did some impressive things. For example, she had one of them in her clutches. The other woman came off the top rope, and she caught her as well. She didn't stumble, she didn't fall backwards, she caught her. It was a great power spot. We got a lot of stuff like that in this match, and in the end, it was a huge upset because Riho got the win. Not Nyla Rose. So that was a bit of an upset, but I thought this was pretty good. We had a very good match. Hangman Page getting the win over MJF, Jungle Boy, who had the Luchasaurus in his corner. And actually, the Luchasaurus carried Jungle Boy to the ring on his shoulders. And Jimmy Havoc in a fatal four-way match. MJF is just the best. He cut a promo before the match on the fans. He tried to get a video games chant. He said, look, we got something in common here. I used to love video games. And he tried to get a video games chant started. And then he said, look, I used to love video games. And then I lost my virginity. And almost on cue, they cut to this poor bastard in the crowd. I don't know if he was planted there on purpose. If not, this guy is just the unluckiest guy in the world, because they just immediately cut to him. And he had this look on his face like, yeah, you're kind of right. I felt bad for him. But character-wise, MJF is the standout. He's always going to be the standout. He's always on. He's great. Performance-wise in this match, though, Jungle Boy I thought was the star. I think Jungle Boy stole the show here in this match. Adam Page got the win, as he should have, because he's the one facing Chris Jericho at All Out to crown a first-ever AEW champion. Although he's going to have to wrestle Kip Sabian up next at their Fight for the Fallen show in a few weeks. Just a lot of nonstop action. Too much for me to recap here. This was, I think, certainly up to this point in the show, match-wise, this was my favorite match. I'd have to think about what my overall favorite match on the show was, honestly, it probably is either between this and maybe the Cody. I enjoyed the Cody match a lot, which was up next. It was Cody against Darby Allin. And this match went to a 20-minute time limit draw. And you really noticed it during this match, but they did it in the other matches as well. They would have time limit calls. I think it was I don't remember if it was every 5. I want to say every 10 minutes. And then as they got closer to the 20 minutes, it was like, 1 minute left, 30 seconds. They were doing time limit calls, and I loved it. It's like you would see in a big New Japan match. And I think it's smart. And I've been of the belief for a long time that WWE ought to, if they don't have time limit calls in the middle of the match, they should at least have more matches that go to a time limit draw. They should announce time limits for their matches. I know Jim Ross for years has been crowing about, how come we don't see more time limits? Because every now and then there's going to be a match, there's going to be an angle where you're going to want it to go down to the wire, and you're going to want people to think the babyface is about to get the win, but then time expires. But it's so obvious, right? Or if you have one big pay-per-view match, and all of a sudden people are talking about a time limit when they've never said word one about a time limit. And then coincidentally, the match goes to a time. It's so fake. It's so phony. It's just so transparent. If you just incorporate the use of time limits into your product full time, when you actually want to have a match, a big match that comes down to the wire and goes to a time limit draw, it won't come off as so transparent. So for that reason alone, I think it's smart. And I love that. These two had what I thought was an excellent match. I've seen a little bit of Darby Allin, but not too much. And I thought that he was the breakout here. He takes a hell of a beating. I'm still in shock from what I saw. Actually, this would probably be number 2 on my list if I was composing a list of absolutely batshit crazy insane spots that did not need to happen for the year 2019. You could probably fill the list with about 50 different things. Number 1 on my list is still, after all these months, the dive that PCO did at, I think it was the Madison Square Garden show. I believe it was. I believe it was the MSG show where he got dumped out of the ring by the Gorillas of Destiny. But it was it was such a brutal fall that he took, and it was such a reckless thing for them to do that I couldn't believe. I went back and I watched that so many times. I could not believe. And of all people to take that kind of bump, PCO, who's got to be what is he now, 50? Somewhere up there. The man really isn't human. I still think back to that spot. This was not quite that out of this world crazy, but he does this spot, the coffin drop, which is basically a truss fall. Only in this case, Cody was laid out on the apron, and he sees this, and he says, I know what I'll do. I'll climb up to the top rope with my back turned, like he's going to do a moonsault, and I'll just jump up high in the air and I'll fall backwards. Yeah, this will end well for me. Well, it didn't. Cody rolled out of the way, and this guy just splatted on the apron, bounced off, and fell to the floor. I could not believe that. Absolutely out of his mind, this guy is. So, the match is coming down to the wire here. Excalibur, I think, chimed in at one point and said, wait a minute, did they just announce there's 1 minute left in this match? And Cody pulls his weight belt off, and he's whipping him with it. And the referee is showing a lot of leeway here. It's not a no DQ match, but she lets it slide. And Cody goes for the crossroads, and I think Allin countered it into like a stunner type move. Cody ended up hitting this great crossroads. Darby Allin, he sold it. He landed right on his head. He spiked himself. And Cody, he crawled over slowly. Brandy is yelling at him, cover him, and he covered him, and it was just a second too late. Time expired, so it went to a draw. I think the more that you do that, people won't kind of look at it as such a bullshit finish. Kind of like they do like a count out. You got to condition people. You just have to condition people that sometimes these matches are going to go to a time limit draw. We saw that a lot with the TV title in WCW back in the mid-90s. Those were 10-minute time limits. But I do think it's smart to incorporate time limits into the show. So even though we didn't get a straight finish here, Darby Allin, I think, again, he had a hell of a performance here. And as Cody is standing in the ring, the match is over. He's calling for more time. Shawn Spears comes down. And Shawn Spears has a chair in his hand. And when Cody turns around, Shawn Spears blasts him in the side of the head with the chair. Hits him right in the head. Cody does not put his arms up, doesn't even attempt to put his arms up. And the announcers tried to sell it like, well, he didn't have time. Jim Ross, too. Oh, he didn't have time to get his hands up. Bullshit. Bullshit. He had plenty of time to get his hands up. Didn't get his hands up. Took a chair shot to the head. And later on Twitter, Sean Spears put a tweet out. It was just like a 5-second clip from one of the, I think, maybe it was like the Road to Double or Nothing series or whatever it was. One of the great YouTube videos they do, where Cody is talking about Sean Spears and having just signed him and brought him aboard. And all Spears did on Twitter was tweet this 5-second clip from that video of Cody calling him a good hand. So that tells you right there the direction they're going in with this story and with this feud. It was a horrible thing. It was a horrible thing because he hits him with the chair in the head. And that's bad enough as it is, right? All this talk about, Tommy Dreamer just did a podcast on depression that I'm going to talk about later on because he told this absolutely insane story that I'm sure many of you have heard by now, but the Paul Heyman story, and I'll talk about that later. But he did this podcast because we've had a couple of different wrestlers or former wrestling personalities in some cases take their own lives recently. At least that's what he said. I don't know if that's official, but that's what Dreamer said. And there's a lot to be said about WWE, banning chair shots to the head. It's not something that I wake up sometimes and say, boy, do I miss chair shots to the head. I wish we could go back to the days of chair shots to the head. No, I miss the days of when I used to look forward to Monday Night Raw. No chair shots to the head does not bother me. There have been some great ones over the years. They used to get a great reaction. I bet if I hit you in the head with something, I'll get a great reaction. But we don't need to see them. And so he takes this chair shot to the head. And supposedly, this is what Tony Khan said. When the show was over, they did a media scrum. Tony Khan said, we called the doctor immediately because Cody was busted open the back of his head. I still don't know exactly what happened here. What I think happened, because he hit him on the left side of the head, and the back of his head, almost on the right side, was opened up. He was literally laying his head in a pool of blood on the mat. You could see a flap of skin, this huge gash. He needed 12 staples. They claim he's got no concussion. They were very quick to announce no concussion. 12 staples in the head, and he was back, sitting in the gorilla position in the back, helping out with the matches later in the show. So obviously he must be okay. And he'll be teaming with his brother against the Young Bucks at the Fight for the Fallen show. But Tony Khan said, we called the doctor immediately. It was obviously really regrettable what happened. We had taken precautions in this situation. So he says, we took precautions in that specific situation. I know one of the Young Bucks was interviewed about this and was very coy and said, oh, you people think that it was an unprotected chair shot. And he was sort of beating around the bush, implying that it was a gimmicked chair. Well, apparently it was not gimmicked enough, since the guy got 12 fucking staples in the back of his head. That doesn't sound very gimmicked to me. So they can use that as an excuse if they want to, but it really doesn't wash. In fact, he used this analogy. He said, you could build the safest airplane in the world, but if there's pilot error, then there's pilot error. I have a solution to this. I'll raise my hand. I have a solution to this. May I? May I volunteer my opinion here? Don't do it in the first place. It's very simple. Don't do it in the first place. And you won't have to worry about pilot error, crashing any planes. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Just don't do it. It's not necessary. Even Jim Ross on commentary, it was so cringy because you have Jim Ross on commentary who obviously didn't know what was going to happen. He sees this. He's probably in his head thinking, boy, what a bunch of fucking idiots. What are they hitting each other in the head with chairs for? He is openly on their own show on commentary talking about CTE. CTE testing. I'm not even sure. Is there even such a thing as CTE testing? I thought you could only test for CTE when you're dead and they test your brain. Maybe there is CTE testing. But their own announcer, the fact that he has to be on commentary on this show talking about this, tells you that this was just a bad move on their part. And you know what really stinks about this? What really stinks is that, and I'm doing it right now, right? A lot of people are talking about nothing but the chair shot. I saw tons of stories and tweets and opinions about the chair shot. So all this is being said about the chair shot, and it's taking away from what I thought was a great match that Cody had with Darby Allin, and what really was a breakout performance in many ways for Darby Allin. And instead, everybody is talking about this dumb chair shot. Don't do that. You could tell a great story with Cody and Shawn Spears without having to resort to that, or at the very least, get your fucking hands up, for God's sakes. You want to do a chair shot to the head? Go ahead, but put your hands up. I never really understood that either. When you really think about it, think about this logically, right? All Elite Wrestling is supposed to be all about doing wrestling the right way and right logic, and we're going to make the titles mean something and wins and losses, right? Okay. Think about this in a logical sense. If you're in a bar fight with somebody, and there happens to be a folding chair, I don't know why there would be, but let's say there's a folding chair. You piss somebody off, right? You're talking to this guy's girlfriend. He picks up the folding chair. Now, unless you just don't see it coming, let's say you do, as Cody did here. You're standing there. This guy's coming at you with a chair. What are you going to... Well, me, I'm probably going to run away. But if you're not going to run away, what are you going to do? You're either going to try to wrestle it away from him, or you're going to put your fucking hands up. So, the fact that he would just stand there like that, frozen in fear, doesn't even make any sense. It's dumb. We had Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks beating Laredo Kid and the Lucha Brothers. Oh my God, the moves in this match it was every bit as insane as you would expect a Lucha Bros match to be, and the Young Bucks and the super kicks and everything else, and Phoenix is just incredible. I mean, he could do things in there that nobody else can. But the Young Bucks came out dressed up as Ken and Ryu from Street Fighter, and Kenny Omega came out dressed up as Akuma from Street Fighter. Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo for the win. I do remember those days. So I got that popped me, watching them come out there in their Street Fighter gear. And they picked up the win here in this insane match. Again, I'm not going to recap all the action because I can't possibly do it justice. But this was certainly one of the highlights of the show. And then we had Jon Moxley in the main event against Joey Janela in an unsanctioned match, a hardcore match, basically a street fight. No rules, no pinfall, well, not no pinfalls, but no countouts and no disqualifications. And this was every bit as insane as you probably would have expected a Jon Moxley-Joey Janela match to be. They introduced a chair wrapped in barbed wire boards. There was a ladder spot in this match, so there's 2 tables set up outside the ring. And Janela has Moxley laying on one of the tables. He brings this giant ladder out from under the ring, sets it up inside the ring. Paul Turner, the referee, is holding the ladder as stable as he possibly can. Janela climbs nearly to the very top of the ladder. And he flies through the air with an elbow drop. He completely missed the first table, but at least he landed on Moxley on the second one, broke the table in half. And they showed this replay. They showed like a couple of replays of this move. And I saw pictures, still photos online of Janela in midair in position for the elbow. And he is a dead ringer, and no joke. He is a dead ringer in these images for Shawn Michaels. Like from afar, with that pose, dropping the elbow, he looks like Shawn Michaels flying through the air. Although Shawn Michaels wouldn't be dumb enough to put himself in a situation here where he would be taking thumbtack bumps on his bare feet. I think he's a little bit smarter than that. But yeah, they introduced thumbtacks, and Moxley, he took off Janela's shoes and his socks. And you can see where this was going. The ring is littered in thumbtacks. So first, he gives Janela an X-Plex on the tacks. That's brutal enough. Then he gives him a feet-first atomic drop. Bare feet on the thumbtacks. And then finally, he gives him the Death Rider on top of the tacks for the win. Which I guess in AEW they're calling the Paradigm Shift, or at least that's what Jim Ross called it, so it may have a different name here. They didn't acknowledge anything New Japan related, so there was no mention of him being the U.S. champion in New Japan, or I don't even know if they mentioned the Death Rider thing, none of that. So it's almost like we're keeping that completely separate. We have nothing to do with New Japan. We don't want to have anything to do with New Japan. They're not even letting him appear on that first night of the G1 in Dallas on July 6th, so I still, in my heart of hearts here, feel that in the end, there's going to be a working relationship between the two companies. But right now, there is no working relationship at all between the two sides. I guess New Japan is being loyal to Ring of Honor, I guess. And Ring of Honor should be grateful for that, because without the New Japan connection, yeesh, they'd be in some trouble. The match itself, look, if you're into these death matches, if you're into these hardcore matches, you probably loved it. And the effort these guys put in, my hat's off to them. They destroyed themselves here. And Janela does that in every match he's in. And Janela has really carved out quite the niche for himself here in wrestling, I have to say. And so good for him. But I'm not the biggest fan of these types of matches. I've said this before. I thought this entire show had a very nice mix of styles. So you went from comedy to lucha to hardcore. So it's got a little bit of everything, I think, for everyone. But I personally could really just do without ever seeing a barbed wire match, barbed wire or thumbtacks or any of that stuff. I just don't see the need for it. It's so played out. When you get to a point like an Impact, they got to a point where they would have these Monsters Ball matches with Abyss, which became his specialty. Abyss ravaged his body doing matches like this for years. He would bring out the barbed wire boards, like they had in this match. He would bring out the thumbtacks. He had a board with nails in it, all this crazy shit. And they were doing them on television like they were just another match. At least if you're going to do a match like this, you do it like they did here. It's on a big show. It's on a pay-per-view. And Tony Khan made it very clear when the show was over that you're not going to see matches like this on TNT. He made that very clear. This was a special thing, but you are not going to see matches like that once we go live on TNT this fall, which I would not have expected. And so, look, again, there's an audience for everything. I get that. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of it. I'd rather not see these guys do this kind of crazy. I mean, come on. Bare feet on the thumb. It's like when I watch clips that people will tag me in on Facebook of some of the other matches with the light tubes and stuff. I just watch that and I'm like, you idiot. You just, what's wrong with you? I don't get it. I don't get it. But look, hey, whatever makes you happy. But I don't get it. I'm not a big fan of it. But they certainly had a mix of styles here on this show. And when the match was over, Kenny Omega came out. He went right after Jon Moxley. He got his revenge for Moxley's attack on him at Double or Nothing. They brawled around the ringside area. They brawled to the stage area where there was a band set up for a band that never showed up. That was kind of tied into this running joke at the beginning of the show about the Fyter Festival and all that. Anyway, he got his revenge on Moxley. He left Moxley laying. Moxley had a smile on his face. He loved it. He loves the violence, does Jon Moxley. In fact, when the match was over, before he got the pin on Janela, after he gave him the implant DDT on top of the tacks, the camera got this great shot of Moxley spitting a thumbtack out of his mouth. I guess it must have bounced up into his mouth. He spit it out. I thought that was a cool shot. I will say that. That was a cool shot. So on the whole, I thought this was a good show. Like I said, it wasn't like a Double or Nothing or anything like that. But there were some really good matches. Unfortunately, the Darby Allin match is going to end up being overshadowed by that dumb chair shot, which hopefully they won't bother with that again. And on to the, Fight for the Fallen is their final kind of semi-big show before All Out at the end of August. So that's coming up in just a few weeks.